From the complete Grimm's fairy tales, this is the tale called Rampion, or otherwise you might know it as Rapunzel. There was once a man and a woman who had long in vain wished for a child. At length the woman hoped that God was about to grant her desire. These people had a little window at the back of their house from which a splendid garden could be seen, and it was full of the most beautiful flowers and herbs. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared go into it because it belonged to an enchantress who had great power and was dreaded by all the world. One day the woman was standing by the window and looking down into the garden when she saw a bed which had planted the most beautiful rampion, and it was looked so fresh and green that she longed for it and had the greatest desire to eat some. This desire increased every day, and as she knew that she could not get any of it, she quite pined away and began to look pale and miserable. Then her husband, alarmed, asked, "What ails you, dear wife?" And she replied, "If I can't eat some of the rampion which is in the garden behind the house, I shall die." The man, who loved her, thought, than let sooner than let the poor wife die, than bring some rampion yourself, for it will cost you well. At twilight he clambered over the wall into the garden of the enchantress, and hastily clutched a handful of rampion, which he took to his wife. She at once made herself a salad of it and ate it greedily. It was so good to her, and so very good, that the next day she longed for it 3 times as much as she did before. If he was to have any rest, her husband must at once descend again into the garden. In the gloom of the evening, therefore, he let himself down again. But when he clambered over the wall, he was terribly afraid, for he saw the enchantress standing before him. "How can you dare," she said with an angry look, "descend into my garden and steal my rampion like a thief? You shall suffer for it." "Ah," answered he, "let mercy take the place of justice. I only had made up my mind to do it out of necessity. My wife saw your rampion from the window, and felt such a longing for it that she would have died if she had not some to eat." Then the enchantress allowed her anger to be softened, and said to him, "If that be the case you say, I will allow you to take it away with you, as much rampion as you will. Only I make one condition. You must give me the child that which your wife brings into the world. It shall be well treated, and I shall care for it like a mother." The man in his terror consented to everything, and when the woman was born, uh, excuse me, the man consented to everything, and when the woman was brought to bed, and the enchantress appeared before her, gave the child the name of Rapunzel, a variety of rampion, and took it away with her. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful child under the sun. When she was 12 years old, the enchantress shut her into a tower which lay in the forest, and had neither the stairs nor the door, but quite on top of the little window. When she cried, the enchantress wanted to go in, and she placed herself beneath the door and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Rapunzel had magnificent long hair, as fine as spun gold, and when she heard the voice of the enchantress, she unfastened her braided tresses, wound them round the hooks of the window above, and then her hair fell 20 ells down, and the enchantress climbed up by it. After a year or two came to pass that the king's son rode through the forest and passed by the tower. Then he heard a song, which was so charming he stood and listened. This was Rapunzel, who in her solitude passed the time by letting her sweet voice resound. The king's son wanted to climb up to her, and looked through the door of the tower, but found none. He rode home, but the singing so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out into the forest and listened to it. Once, when he came there and was standing behind a tree, he saw how an enchantress came, and heard her cry, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then Rapunzel would let down her braids of hair, and the enchantress climbed up to her. If this is the ladder which one mounts, I too will try my fortune," he said. And the next day, when it was to grow dark, he went to the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Immediately the hair fell down, and the king's son climbed up. At first Rapunzel was terribly frightened when a man, as her eyes had never yet beheld, came to her. But the king's son began to talk to her quite like a friend, and told her that his heart had been so stirred that it had given him no rest, and he had forced to see her. Then Rapunzel lost her fear, and when he asked her if she would have him for a husband, she said that he was young and handsome, and thought, "He will love me more than the old Dame Gothel does." And she said yes, and laid her hand into his. She said, I will go willingly away with you, but I do not know how to come down. Bring me a skein of silk every time that you need to come, and I will weave a ladder from it. And then when that is ready, I will descend, and you will take me on your horse." They agreed that until that time he should come for her every evening, and the old woman came by day. The enchantress remarked nothing of this until once Rapunzel said to her, "Tell me, Dame Gothel, how it happens that you are so much heavier for me to draw up than the young king's son? He is with me in a moment." "Ah, you wicked child!" cried the enchantress. "What what did I hear you say? I thought I had separated you from the world, and yet you have deceived me." In her anger, she clutched Rapunzel's tresses and wrapped them twice around her left hand, and seized a pair of scissors by the right, and snip, snap, snip, they were cut off, and the lovely braids laid on the ground. She was so pitiless that she took poor Rapunzel into a desert, and she had to live in great grief and misery. On the same day as she cast her out, Rapunzel, however, the enchantress fastened the braids of hair which she had cut off to a hook on the window, and when the king's son came and cried out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." She let down the hair, and the king's son ascended. But instead of finding his dearest Rapunzel, he found the enchantress, who gazed at him with wicked and venomous looks. "Aha!" she cried mockingly. "You would fetch your dearest, but the beautiful bird sits no longer singing in the nest. The cat has got it, and will scratch out your eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to you, and you will never see her again." The king's son was beside himself with pain, and in his despair he leapt down from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns into which he fell pierced his eyes. He wandered quite blind about into the forest, and ate nothing but roots and berries, and did not but lament and weep over the loss of his dearest wife. Thus he roamed about in misery for some years, and at length came to a desert where Rapunzel, with the twins to which she had given birth, a boy and a girl, lived in wretchedness. He heard a voice, and it seemed so familiar to him that he went towards it. And when he approached, Rapunzel knew him, and fell on his neck and wept. Two of the tears wetted his eyes, and they grew clear again, and he could see as before. He led her to his kingdom, where he was received joyfully, and they lived for long times afterwards and were happy and contented.